All right, welcome to the Gaming Lounge podcast, episode 30. Once again, I'm your host, Sebastian, and I'm joined by Dory. How's everything going, Dory?
Finding the frustrations of trying to beat a JRPG in a manageable amount of time, but at least my voice is mostly back to normal, and I'm probably more even leveled because my gaming chair and my earbuds decided to break in the same week, so having a tremendous time over here. Hopefully my camera doesn't look too blurry. I don't know. I look a little out of focus, but whatever. But yeah, I've just been playing Metaphor, ton of Metaphor, so we'll talk about that later, and then we've got random bits and bobs of news.
How was your Halloween?
Oh, it was great. Kim and I finally revived our Halloween tradition of watching Over the Garden Wall and eating a bunch of candy. I still cried at the last episode, even though I've seen the show like 3 or 4 times. And I feel like I cry in a different spot every time. So I think this time I cried when the kids were discovered in the final episode. But yeah, it's such a tremendous show. I really recommend it. I also really recommend The Menu, which was Kim and I's favorite horror movie that we watched last month. Out of all the movies we watched like 15. But yeah, go see The Menu if you haven't, and go in totally blind because you don't want anything spoiled. It's a tremendous movie. Probably one of my favorite horror movies of all time, honestly. But yeah, other than that, how was your Halloween?
Halloween was really good. It was very busy. My Halloween basically started at 9 in the morning because for the whole school day I was putting on scary shows and movies. I put on Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Nice.
The 90s one. I put on The Haunting Hour, which is like the 2010 Goosebumps, which is a little more targeted towards 12-year-olds, so they found it scary. I was like, you guys are really finding this scary, but they were all like into it. They were all screaming and laughing and everything, so like
Yeah.
they were really into it. They were like I don't know if you ever seen The Haunting Hour, but like there's one like
I haven't.
There's like one iconic character or villain from that show is like a doll, like a creepy doll, like a girl,
Right.
like a black hair and everything, and she's like Chucky in a way, and everybody was like all the kids were like really scared by it, and like they were cheering, and then when she gets like ran over at the end, their kids were cheering like they won the Super Bowl. It was fun. I would never go to the movie.
That's so fun.
I would never go to the movies with my students because kids they never stop talking. They like to commentate on every little thing, but it's fun. It's fun when you're like in like a classroom setting where everybody's cheering. But so I did that, and
I remember when
yeah, go ahead.
I remember when I showed some anime clips to some students that I was substitute teaching for, specifically the Android 17 Piccolo fight, and plus a couple other things, and they couldn't stop talking about like, oh, he laid him out right there. Oh my god, like et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, guys, it's a cool fight, but it's like, shh.
Yeah, kids don't know how to be quiet, but that adds to the fun. But I also passed out candy all day, and kids were all dressed up in costumes and everything. So Halloween was all day for me. And then I came home and I passed out candy to trick-or-treaters and walked around. Most of the houses were terrible Scrooges. Like no one really decorated, but there was a lot of people though. But there was a lot of people though trick-or-treating, right. But like for whatever reason, a lot of people didn't decorate at all. So my Halloween was literally from 9 in the morning to like 9 o'clock at night. So it was a very long day. And then the next day I was tired, so I just put on movies for the kids and relaxed. So I'm refreshed. Sure. I'm refreshed now. So it was a good Halloween. I really liked it. Overall October was a pretty good month. I was really busy, but it flew and I flew by, but it was pretty chill overall. So it was a good Halloween. And so in the meantime, I've been playing a lot more games this week because I had more time to do so, because last week was all about like essays and grading them and all that stuff, lesson planning, and I just had zero time to do anything. This week I was able to play more games, but before we get into that, let's talk. We got a lot of news that happened this week. Of course, the news are very 2024-ish, very negative, unfortunately.
Yep.
The news always tends to be leans more pessimistic and negative and miserable. So let's start with Ubisoft.
It's unfortunate.
Our favorite company. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this one is a little more positive in the sense that what they want is they want to be back to early 2010 to 2020 Ubisoft, which was definitely a lot better than they were the last 4 years. The last 4 years has been a mess for them, to say lightly. Uh, Especially the last 2 years, even this year, Ubisoft's had a rough go. Their stock's not doing very well. Unfortunately, that led to a lot of layoffs, which we'll talk about right now. So Ubisoft has announced a significant shift in its corporate strategy. It's aiming to regain that creative spark that happened from the last decade, from 2010 to 2020. During that period, we had a lot of Assassin's Creed and Far Cry, which a lot of them were acclaimed, but even in that decade, people got tired of them. I feel like there was just too many of them at some point. Like it just got Assassin's Creed became annual, and people were like, "Can you just stop?"
It was really frustrating.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the CEO believes that they should streamline their operations, and that included laying off over 2,000 employees, unfortunately, and that was to make the company more agile and innovative. Their restructuring is part of Ubisoft's strategy to deliver fresh, unique gaming experiences in an increasingly competitive market. So, I understand what they're doing, and I don't think it's a bad idea to streamline their games. I feel like it's better to get away from the big giant live service games, focus more on your IPs, make more contained, smaller, focused games that are creative. Unfortunately, in order to do that, you had to lay off your employees, which I don't agree with, and which sucks. But that's just the nature of how the industry is going, because all these companies overhired everybody during COVID, and they're realizing we don't have they have the money, but they were like, we hire too many people and we have to cut them out to get some money back, and unfortunately that's led to a lot of firings, and I feel Dory and I have talked about this a lot, but we feel for the people who lost their jobs. Of course, that's
for sure.
It's sad. It's a common occurrence every week. It feels like studios shutting down, and people getting fired. But I do think it's a smart idea for them to streamline their creative process and, like I said, make smaller, contained games, focus more on their IPs and less on a shitload of games. That's the problem with Ubisoft, in my opinion, is their games all feel like they're made in a factory where they're just manufacturing game after game after game. It's like 4 or 5 games in a year, and they're like service games that die out in like 3 months. I mean, there's so many of those examples of Ubisoft just either throwing it in a service in a single player game that doesn't need to be in there, or doing anti-consumer practices, or just making a game that no one cares about and it dies in 3 months. And I think that's the biggest problem they're having, and I think that's what he means by streamlining it. How do you feel?
Yeah, so it's my favorite time. It's fuck Ubisoft time. Fuck Ubisoft o'clock. I don't know. Look, I agree with you that I like what they're going for, but I don't like how they're trying to do it. Which is pretty much the same thing you just said, right? I mean, I respect and appreciate that they want to make their company smaller, but I feel like there are better ways. You could just create something. Now, I'm not any kind of business person, right? But just off the cuff, intuitively speaking, it seems like if you really wanted to make your company smaller and more agile, you would split it up so that maybe you have sub companies within the bigger company or something like that. Have it so that if you don't have a need for certain people, why don't you bring them to a different Ubisoft in a different country, or a different working remotely if they can't move, or moving them to a different different division or something. It feels like there are other ways to deal with this than simply laying people off. It also didn't help that much making them more agile, because they still have 18,000 employees or something. We need to get under 10,000 before I start seeing the word agile in their vocabulary, because that is a lot of fucking people. And I'm not saying that makes them inherently bad or bad at games, but I haven't bought a Ubisoft game in I don't even know how many years. And if I have, it was probably by accident, not even knowing that they were a publisher or something like that.
Yeah.
It's just a mess. I think Ubisoft has honestly sucked for a long time. Even apart from their workplace culture issues, which are many and serious. and have been gone into many times, so really don't need to be retread here. But also just their games have not been super impressive. I mean, I feel like they really turned Assassin's Creed from this really cool immersive stealth game that took on different genres, especially with Black Flag, which I loved, to just like a bloated RPG game that can go way too long and is way too stuffed with like enemy HP, and you couldn't even kill people in one shot anymore when you're an assassin. It just got further and further away from what made Assassin's Creed such a cool series to begin with Assassin's Creed 2. I even like 3, even though it's not as good. Black Flag, of course. And there's nothing wrong with the series growing and changing and adapting to what's new. But I just feel like Ubisoft took all the wrong lessons from, what they wanted out of the series. Generally speaking, I just stay away from Ubisoft games. Now, there are exceptions. Once Outlaws gets patched up, maybe I'll play it at some point when it's on heavy discount. But yeah, I mean, like you said, a lot of the games now, open world games especially, have telltale signs of Ubisoft-ish traits because it's become so widespread in the game industry. A lot of the games just feel the same. I remember trying a demo for that game we talked about last week. I never remember the title because it's so generic. But basically, the Ubisoft Breath of the Wild game that they made.
Immortals Phoenix Rising.
Thank you, Immortals Phoenix Rising. What a fucking title. And I tried to play it for about 30 minutes to an hour, and I just found it very, very bog standard, very not compelling. I know there are some fans of it. Some people did enjoy it, and that's great. I know some people still love Ubisoft in terms of their games, and that's awesome for you, I guess. But Ubisoft hasn't done it for me since Black Flag, and Black Flag was a long time ago at this point. I do hope they do something cool with Shadows, and I wanted something great for Mirage, but it kind of just sounded like we got a really bare bones, stripped back Assassin's Creed, which is kind of what everybody wanted, but it kind of and it was a shorter game, so it is like steps in the right direction. But from what I heard from reviewers, they kind of stripped certain mechanics back too much. So it's just a delicate balance, and I feel like Ubisoft isn't pulling it off.
Yes, I do like the newer Assassin's Creed games in the sense like I think Valhalla was a good game. I just thought it was too long. I thought Odyssey was a good game, but it was too long. And I thought Origins was a good game, but it was too long. And I think that's the problem is that like a self-contained, more like 25-hour, 30-hour Assassin's Creed open world game was great. But like 50 plus to 70 to 90, 80, 90, 100 hours, it's just too much. I think that's a big problem with the industry as a whole right now, is that there's just too many games coming out, and a lot of the studios are like struggling right now because when you have like 5 games coming out each week, how do adults, the consumers, have so much time in their week to buy the games and play them, and that's what's happening. I think a lot of these games is that like, how do you get people to buy your game and play them over others? And the answer is usually you can't. I
would describe Seb and I both as pretty hardcore gamers. We legitimately cannot keep up with the month of October. Like, I'm only just maybe going to beat Metaphor tonight. I mean, I probably will beat it tonight. But like, there's still Life is Strange, which is about, I don't know, 10 to 15 hours or something like that, maybe less.
Yeah.
And then there's Dragon Age after that, which is, of course, I don't know, 50 hours, something like that. It's bonkers, and November still has a couple of hits to come as well. I don't know how anyone's supposed to keep up with this, and that's pushing aside a bunch of indies that I wanted to play, like Neva, and I was interested in Kill Knight, and then the Alan Wake DLC that came out. It's wild.
Yep, and Ubisoft's gonna realize that, because I feel like a lot of their games come out at like the wrong time for me and other people. Like like Assassin's Creed coming, like Mirage coming out in October of last year, when like you had Alan Wake and Spider-Man in the same month and stuff like that. That was ridiculous. So it was a good move on their part to move Shadow, but then I think they moved it in February, and February's stacked, right? Like there's so many games coming out in February, so
yeah. Expedition's coming out. Well, it's allegedly coming out around that time. Maybe not in February.
Oh, but I hope not.
No. What I was thinking of is Yakuza. Yakuza's coming out in February.
Yeah, Yakuza and Avowed and Monster Hunter.
Yes, and Avowed. So that's 2 big games I'll be playing that I'd rather play than a Ubisoft game.
Isn't Monster Hunter coming out in February? Top of my
I
head.
think so. Yeah, it is because the Yakuza director wanted to move their game that way they didn't compete with Capcom.
So Assassin's Creed should come out like into the summertime. I feel like that's a better time for an Assassin's Creed
Yeah, it
game.
gives them more time to polish it. God knows Ubisoft games usually need it. I mean,
Yeah.
Outlaws had a ton of bugs and a ton of issues. They had to do a day one patch, of course, and then I think they were still patching it. I think it's better now, of
Yeah.
course, but it shouldn't be that way. Games should come out complete. It feels at this point sacrilegious to say that, but games should come out in a complete way. Like, say what you want about Dragon Age Veilguard, and plenty of people have mixed opinions about it. It runs pretty smooth by most people's account. It has smooth FPS. There's not a lot of bugs. There's not a lot of glitches. There's no crashes. Not from what I've heard anyway. And so it's like, you say what you want, but at least it's a complete game, which it shouldn't be the fucking that standard's in hell. Like, that is a low bar, but that's where we are in the gaming industry, sadly. And it's not. I'm not blaming the devs, to be clear. I mean, I think it's harsh deadlines. It's overworked people. It's burnout. It's a lot of stuff. God, I wish they'd bring burnout back.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a lot of stuff, and I'm not blaming the devs necessarily, but it's a very tricky industry right now, to say it kindly.
And we talked in the past before about how studios have a hard time reading the room and misunderstanding what the audience wants. And a perfect example of that was Firewalk Studios with Concord, because Concord was a huge disaster, arguably the biggest disaster in Sony's history, right? And they lost. Yeah. People said they lost like $200 million on this, and that's just like the game alone. Imagine how much it cost them to purchase the studio and make all those marketing deals. If whatever marketing they did, I never really saw marketing for it. But
I didn't either.
But Firewalk Studios, it was such a disaster that the studio was closed down, which is no surprise, because usually when the gaming industry is very volatile, and
especially 2024, 2023,
especially, and if your game fails, you're done. Even if you're like Rocksteady, for example, right? Like Suicide Squad is a disaster, and now Rocksteady's on the brink of possibly dissolving because from Warner Brothers, right? Like, and not saying it will, but there's been talks about things like that, and that's what I'm saying. Like, you can be a great studio for like 15 years and then make one disastrous game, and your studio is done, because games cost so much money now. It's like we're talking $200 million, right? So if your game fails, like, you don't have the money to pay your employees and everything else, the studio space, and then you have to close your studio. And so let's talk about that with Neon Koi and Firewalk Studios. So recently this week, Sony announced that they closed 2 of their studios, Firewalk Studios and Neon Koi, which impacted about 210 employees. Firewalk developed Concord, which faced mixed reviews post-launch, although I think it was largely negative, honestly. I know some people were liking it and having fun with it, but for the most part, I think even from like day one, when they showed it at the State of Play, people's reaction were like, "That's the game." Like, what we want, I think people wanted like a Guardians of the Galaxy single player kind of game.
Yeah,
it ended up being an arena shooter, like Overwatch, like a million of them. And so, because Sony was investing in a lot of live service games, and but the weird thing is they canceled The Last of Us 1 factions for this game. It's like, what were they seeing that was like, wow, we should really get this game out? Or was it like, or were they just like too deep in, and whether like like they just couldn't cancel it? They just had to
they pulled the Sum 41. They were definitely in too deep on this one.
Yeah. And then the Sony's leadership explained that the closures are part of a broader strategy to concentrate on sustainable long-term projects. I think that just means we're going to cut back on more service games and try to get back to, our single-player games. I think, now we talked about this before with Astrobot, but I think what Sony wants is going to be more on the lines of Astrobot. Not so much like it's going to be a platformer or 5 smaller game, but I think they want more contained, shorter games, you know what I mean? Not like bloated 50-hour cinematic games. We'll have that still too. But so I think Sony's realizing that their audience is not filling the service games like they were hoping for. And I don't think any of them have been successful besides Helldivers to draw an audience in. So I think internally for the last couple of years, Sony has drifted away from their plan now that Jim Ryan's gone. And we're just not going to see that for a couple of years, because games, it's going to take years for them to get back on track, because game development takes forever. Anyway,
of course.
So I think this topic more than anything tells you shows you the problem with Sony's strategy with live service games and how risky that is. Because it's one thing to release God of War or Horizon or something that like people play and they love it for 30 hours or whatever, and that's it. And they make a lot of money. But it's nothing with service games because you have to keep supporting it. You have to keep you have to have the right people in place to know how to handle it. And there's so many of them, and then I think the term live service is so toxic. Like people
Yep.
hear people hear live service and they automatically roll their eyes, right? And so Sony's
Yeah.
took a huge chance with this, and I think it's backfired.
To me, live service is a bad word at this point. If I hear live service, I tune out, at least to some extent.
Yeah,
It's just not something that really appeals to me in general, right? But like, I know what kind of game that is, and it's really not for me.
yes, and I think the Bungie acquisition has been a disaster, really, for them. Like I think they regret it at this point. $4 billion,
Yeah,
they could have developed a bunch of games for that money. I mean, they purchased
yeah,
Ubisoft. No, they purchased Insomniac for like what 400 million, 300 million. So like they got a huge deal on Insomniac, and they got Spider-Man out of it and Ratchet and Clank. And
yeah, probably, but one of the best deals of all time. Insomniac is one of the best. I would say one of the best publishers of all time in the gaming industry right now. I mean, they're so incredibly consistent. They have a good workplace culture. Yeah, I mean, it's a really laudable company in a lot of ways.
yeah, Insomniac's carried Sony on their back this generation, right? Like
Yes, absolutely.
we've gotten nothing from Naughty Dog outside remasters and remakes.
Yeah, Naughty Dog has been. I maybe after Last of Us Part Two and before all the remasters and remakes, I would have said they were the number 2 company for Sony. But now, I mean, I don't even know where they rank. They've done fuck all since
I would say they were.
the TV show.
I would say they're number one. I'd say they're the crown jewel of Sony. But this
I just
generation,
mean in terms of like output. Like,
oh yeah,
their output's abysmal.
oh yeah. I mean, I don't think anyone cares if they're releasing masterpieces, right? Like if Uncharted 4, Last of Us 1, Last of Us 2, or if their games are on that level, then I don't think anyone cares. But like when you have nothing for what 4 years now, right? Because
Yeah, it's been 4 years.
Last
Yeah,
of Us Part 2 came out in what July of 2020, or I think it was like something like that. June. It was June of 2020. Like it's been 4 years, and it was not only that, but like absolutely no news. That's the biggest problem, right? Like we've gotten no mention of Last of Us Part 3. We've gotten no mention of their new fantasy game that they're working on. That's been rumored forever. And then the only thing we know is Factions got canceled. So the point is, Insomniac has been carrying Sony on their back. We gotten Spider-Man 1 remastered on PS5. We gotten Ratchet and Clank, and we've gotten Spider-Man 2, all within what this whole generation, 4 years, and
yeah.
Miles Morales. And
I don't even know how they do that so consistently, but they did, and they've been able to do it similar to Studio RGG, I think they're called, or I can't remember, but the Yakuza studio.
Yeah.
I mean, similar to their output, right? Obviously not owned by by PlayStation, but yeah, a similar kind of story where they've been able to do that and maintain a healthy workplace environment, as far as we know.
I'm guessing that's because both studios have like they reuse the assets in the city.
Right, right. Yeah.
Spider-Man has New York, and they kind of just all they have to do is add on it and change some things around.
Yeah.
Miles Morales, they just change the city into like a snowy winter time New York and that kind of stuff. But and then now you got Wolverine, like it's gotta be coming out what. If not next year, at least 2026, or we're definitely going to see a trailer. You would think we're going to see some gameplay and trailer next year. I would think, right? I think it's time to reveal it. It's been a while now. So anyway, so that's that. Let's move on to some news about Mass Effect 5 with BioWare. Mass Effect 5 is not going to do not use stylized visual like Dragon Age, the Veilguard uses. Instead, they're going to keep with the photorealism of the original series. So let me read this. BioWare's upcoming Mass Effect 5 will remain visually grounded in photorealism, a style that project director Michael Gamble confirms is essential to the game's identity. Responding to fans' concerns that Mass Effect might adopt the stylized, cartoon-like visuals seen in BioWare's other upcoming title, Dragon Age: The Veilguard. Gamble reassured that Mass Effect 5 will retain the mature, realistic aesthetic that fans associate with the original trilogy. He emphasized that sci-fi RPGs like Mass Effect require a different approach from high fantasy titles like Dragon Age, making photorealism a better fit for the game's narrative and immersive qualities. Now, do you agree with him about that? Like, does it matter? Do you think do you think science fiction should be photorealistic?
Well, I don't think it has to be photorealistic, but I understand where he's coming from, and I don't entirely disagree. Yeah. I think Mass Effect is one of my favorite series. I was thinking about it. I don't think Dragon Age is one of my favorite series just because like it's kind of inconsistent. Like I love Origins to death. Yeah. I think Dragon Age 2 is overhated, but just great, not much more. And Dragon Age Inquisition, from what I've seen, is excellent. And of course, I haven't really played Veilguard. But I like the more cartoony style that they are doing in Veilguard so far. I've only gone through the prologue and stuff, but I think it looks nice. But I also like the photorealistic element, and I think that makes it stand out more. You know, when you have a company that's doing two very different genres, like sci-fi and fantasy, high fantasy especially, with mages and creatures and dragons and stuff, you want them to stand out and be different. And so on that basis alone, I agree with Gamble that it's a good idea to have one looking photorealistic and one looking, a little more cartoony. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I don't think it has to be that way though, but I understand where he's coming from.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be, but I agree with you. I think it should be because it should match the tone and the look of the original trilogy. Because if it's Mass Effect 5, it should match the rest of the Mass Effect games, including Andromeda.
For sure.
So Gamble also hinted that Mass Effect 5 will embrace the serious tone and complex themes of the earlier games of the series, which distances it from the the lighter atmosphere of Andromeda. Did you ever beat Andromeda or ever played it?
I never played it.
Yeah, I beat it. It's not. I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be. I think when I played it though, they patched a lot of things to fix it up. I don't think it was a great game.
Right.
It's definitely a huge step down from the original games, but I definitely think it's worth a playthrough. For at least
I've heard really the gameplay is the best element, and then there's a lot of story issues, and kind of like you're saying here, some tonal issues.
Yeah, definitely, and so the people. I think some people have issues with the Dragon Age look, like the Veilguard. Like some people have criticized how they've made some of the species look a little more how much should I put it? Smoother.
Yeah, I know what they're talking about. I don't disagree. I think that's just a bad rendering of that particular race. I disagree with the way that they're portraying them. I don't necessarily think that's the fault of the genre.
Yeah, there's definitely a political side of some of the narrative what people are pushing on that one,
right,
it's woke, but
of course
I do agree though that I think that some of the characters in Inquisition looks cooler and look more grounded. I think Veilguard definitely goes for a more cartoony look, and I don't think it looks bad by any means. It's just different, and it's okay if you disagree, you don't like it, but I am happy to hear that Mass Effect's going to keep a photorealistic.
There's nothing wrong with the Veilguard thing, but it's all aesthetic. If you don't like that more cartoony stuff, and you like a more photorealistic element, I mean, look right here, Mass Effect's going to happen, and it's going to have that. So I feel like BioWare is catering to both audiences here, and I think that's a good thing.
Yes, I agree, and I also like that they're doing two different art styles and two different series, and I'll talk about Dragon Age more in detail next week, but I like the look of it so far. I think it looks great. I play in ultra settings and it looks really nice. I like the colors.
And even the low settings on my laptop, I think it looks really nice. It took a few seconds to pause and look at the environments and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And even on my relatively rinky-dink gaming laptop, it looks really nice. And I think all the characters look really nice. I'm having a good time with it so far in terms of visuals.
Right. And then also N7 Day is November 7th, which is next week.
Right.
So maybe we'll see some Mass Effect 5 stuff there.
That's what we're hoping.
Yeah. So we'll see. All right, let's move on to Marvel's Wolverine's creative director leaving Insomniac for Perfect Dark. So, Marvel's Wolverine's director Brian Horton recently announced his departure from Insomniac Games, where he had been overseeing development of the highly anticipated Wolverine game. Horton is joining Xbox's The Initiative to work on Perfect Dark, marking a significant shift for him in both studios. Horton has a long history of creative contributions to AAA games, including roles on projects like Marvel Spider-Man 2 and the Tomb Raider series, which makes his move to the Initiative noteworthy as the studio has been working on reviving Perfect Dark as a first-person shooter with a modernized touch. So I think Perfect Dark's already looked good, like surprisingly good, right? Because this game has been hell. It's been in development hell, and
yes,
what they showed at the show, I forget what I think it was an Xbox show in the Summer Game Fest. I want to say.
Yep. It was the one show that we really lauded. We really liked.
Yeah, it was really good, and I was really impressed. And this is a great get for the Initiative. I think Perfect Dark is a really good IP that can really help Xbox, and I'm really excited for it. It's probably the day one game for me as somebody that grew up with Perfect Dark on the Nintendo 64, and I did play the one on the 360, but that one was trash, so I wouldn't recommend that one. But so it's been a dormant franchise since basically the 90s in terms of being good. So I'm excited for that. So this is a good get. How do you feel about this in terms of for Initiative? First of all,
this is Game Ranks, which is a YouTube channel both Seb and I follow, does this weird gaming stories of a given month, and I feel like this should definitely go in there. I've never really heard of a creative director departing from one company to another while both games are in development, while they're basically rival companies too. Like Wolverine is a PlayStation studio outfit and Perfect Dark is an Xbox studio outfit. So it's just kind of weird. I'm not saying that's bad or wrong, just weird. I feel like I've never seen this kind of thing happen before in the gaming industry, at least not recently. But that said, I mean, like you said, it is a great get for them. I did not grow up with Perfect Dark. Honestly, I didn't even know about the franchise until I don't remember even knowing about it as a kid. Until people started hyping up the new one. I was like, Perfect Dark. I knew about it because it was Rare and the company Rare, not the quality. And of course I knew Rare because of Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong 64 and Banjo-Kazooie, of course, which I love. So I knew of it, but I never played it. I didn't know a lot about it. I kind of knew it as like a James Bond knockoff or something like that, but I never played it. So, but this seems like a cool thing for them. I hope it helps. I'll definitely be paying attention. Is Perfect Dark coming to Game Pass? I can't remember.
Oh, definitely. It's first
so
party.
I'll probably give it a shot, unless it gets like horrible reviews. I'll even if it's 70s or something, I'll probably give it a shot. But yeah, I don't have much experience with it as a franchise.
Yeah. Now, in terms of Insomniac, this makes me wonder two things. First, is Wolverine basically completed where the director can just get up and leave? Like, is it like that, or it's just they're just polishing it and that's why the director can leave? Or was there internal issues in Insomniac with him, and they had like a difference in creativity with someone else and they wanted to roll with that person? We don't know, right? That's just speculation. But it's very odd for a director just to get up and leave when the game is so close and being worked on, so close to completion and being worked on, and to go to like a rival company. So Microsoft must have paid a great amount of money to accomplish that. But like I'm leaning on that Wolverine's pretty much done, and they're just polishing it up because Insomniac is just wizards like that. So I don't want to like just assume that like there was internal issues, but I think it's a possibility if they feel like if someone just got up and left like that. Like you usually just don't see that. How do you feel about that? Do you think it was like internal issues, or do you think it was just like it's ready to go almost, or is it like a mix?
I don't know. What do you remember? What I never looked out of respect for the. I'm not saying it is disrespectful. I personally felt like out of respect for the studio, I never looked at the leaks.
Yeah.
But did like the leaks ever say anything about how far along Wolverine was, or
we saw gameplay, like the whole thing. It looked pretty clean. Like it looked like not I'm say ready to go, but it definitely had like the quality. You can see what kind of game it was. 100%.
Right. So I think then it seems like it probably wouldn't be internal issues. I feel like if it was internal issues, that would be more apparent. Maybe there'd be some wording, or maybe there would be some hot scoops from Jason Schreier or something. But we haven't gotten any of that.
Yeah.
This seems like just a case of a gaming director being like, all right, my work is just about done here. I'm out. I'm going to go help these other guys. I mean, it feels like, funnily enough, going back to comic books, it feels like a long-time DC writer going to Marvel to help out on a new project. You have that happen all the time in the comics industry, where you have long-time Marvel people go over to DC and vice versa. People, fucking gamers all the time are like console war, but the people in these companies don't give a shit. They just want to get paid. They want to put food on their table for their families. They want to be able to afford the life they have. They don't care about that stuff. And neither should anybody else, but alas, c'est la vie. So yeah, I mean, I think that's part of what's happening here. I think he's just, all this is speculation, of course. I don't know, but by all accounts, it seems like a weird but good thing, kind of.
Yeah, my assumption is that Microsoft paid a pretty penny to get him, and he did it for the the money and the benefits. Of course, why wouldn't anyone refuse that? Like, that'd just be stupid. So I think that's more than anything. I think that's probably what happened. And and I think we would all make the same decision. And, you and I are neutral. We don't give a shit about console wars. I mean, we both mainly play on PC now anyway. So
yeah, exactly.
So even less so, I care about it.
Right.
So yeah, either way, I'm excited for both games. Well, I think Wolverine is going to be a great game because going by Insomniac's track record, I've loved all the Spider-Man games, and I've loved I loved Ratchet and Clank, and I think Perfect Dark looked really good. I was really impressed by what they showed at Summer Game Fest. So overall, I think it's a good move for both studios. Like, I think it's fine for Insomniac, and I think it's a great move on Initiative's part. So let's move on now. So we now, on the other hand, with another Xbox studio, they apparently do have some disagreements in their management because the Arkane's founder, he left Bethesda because, quote, did not want to do the kind of games that we wanted to make, and that's how it ended with Redfall. And, we all know the disaster that was Redfall. A game that, like, from my understanding, Microsoft just, when they bought Bethesda, were just like, you just get out, just push it out there. It's already being worked on. So it's not like Microsoft pushed Redfall to happen. It was just more like, it's so far in, just get it out there. And it was a mess. It was a complete mess. It was an embarrassment. And that was supposed to be like one of their marquee games. Like, they advertised it at the end of their showcases at times. Like, it was like the big.
Oh God, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I even remember. I think the first time they ever announced it, they did it at the end of the show, and I was like, "That's what you end with." Like, even at the time, I was underwhelmed. I was like, "I get it. It's an Arkane studio, and it's a new game, but like, why is this the final game?"
Right. So let me give you some more detail. So Raphael Colantonio, founder of Arkane Studios, left due to a mismatch in the vision with Bethesda, especially following the lackluster commercial response to Prey. Now, I think Prey is underrated, but yeah, it wasn't like a success. It was just kind of it's not appreciated enough. I think Prey is a good game. People should play it. He wanted Arkane to remain focused on immersive sims, much like Larian Studios or From Software, while Bethesda shifted towards live service models. And here we go again, live service. The change led to the creation of Redfall, which diverged from Arkane's typical style. Post-Arkane, Colantonio continues working on immersive experiences with his studio, Wolfeye, which recently developed Weird West, which story beat. I haven't played that yet, but I am interested in playing it.
I love that game. It's a great game.
Yeah, so he made that one. This rift highlights tensions between the creative aspirations and the corporate strategy in gaming. So this ties into what we've been talking about earlier. A lot of studios are pushing for live service games. A lot of creative directors are like, nah, we don't want to do that. But then executives are like, yes, you are, because it makes money, and we're going to push it on you. Hence, people leaving. Hence, anti-corporate, anti-consumer practices and all the nonsense that we get in the industry all the time now. So this just ties into what we talk about like over and over again. 2024, in a nutshell, Zex pushing live service on everybody because
Yeah.
Fortnite. And I think was it Sean Layden recently? He works for Tencent now. He said people need to stop trying to be Fortnite because you're not gonna out Fortnite Fortnite. Fortnite just has the epic.
Right.
They have the epic money. They have they have all the licenses with Goku, Star Wars, every Disney character. Like it's just there's no way you're competing with Fortnite. So stop trying to be Fortnite. And I agree with him.
I know it's old news now, but I mean, they were literally in Infinity War, one of the most popular movies of the entire year that it came out. I mean, they were featured prominently in that game. I think at the time too, it was funny because people were like, in 5 years, in 2024, no way Fortnite's still going to be popular. It's still just a fad. Because I think at that time it'd only been a couple of years or a few years since it'd come out.
Yeah.
So people figured it would die down. But I mean, Fortnite's probably as popular as it's ever been, if not more so.
Yes. I think what it is, and what I noticed as a teacher that teaches 11, 12-year-olds, is they're not the same as when we were kids. When we were kids, we played a lot of single-player games, right? On PS2, we played God of War came out when I was 12, and Resident Evil 4, and Gears of War. And the kids today, they only play mobile games and service games. They play Fortnite, they play Minecraft, they play Roblox. It's totally different. I think a lot of studios are realizing like a lot of gamers growing up are not going to be the way we are. So I'm not saying like single player games are going away or anything like that. I think the reason why a lot of these execs are pushing this because they see that like Gen Alpha and Gen Z are like more into the service games. We feel like the old people getting pushed out of the way, right? We're in the retirement home asking for single player games.
I'm the old man yelling at the sky, yelling at the clouds, right?
What a broom!
Get these live services out of my gaming.
Yeah, that's what's happening. Because like, when I have conversation about video games with my students, it's like they only play like those games. They love like mobile games.
I have the same experience with the kids I've worked with in the past and present. Like I literally got called or got told I wasn't a real gamer once by a kid because I haven't played Fortnite, Minecraft, or Roblox, right? The big three. I was like, they were like, you're not a real gamer. You don't play any of those games. I was like, I cannot believe I just got called not a real gamer by a 9-year-old. But yeah, it's just a different world out there, and that's fine. I'm not, it's not inherently bad, but it does suck that this gets pushed on companies, on teams, and then they get laid off because the execs end up being wrong. Like, okay, a lot of 14-year-olds and their interest, or 14 or younger, and their interest in Fortnite is the future, but it's not necessarily the present, because a lot of present day gamers, people in their 20s and 30s, kind of reject the live service model. So, I mean, I don't know if it's a case of them just not waiting long enough, or if it's something else, like maybe the demand just isn't quite there, or it's just too tainted by what's happened. I don't know.
I think the issue is that it's too saturated with the same genres of games, and that like it's almost impossible to break in with your own unique experience. You really have to stand out, and I think a lot of these games do not stand out, right? Like Concord just looks exactly like every other arena shooter that you've seen before. Like a lot of these games just die out because they're not going to out Fortnite, and that's the problem. And like a lot of these execs making studios like Arkane turn into a live service studio is not the move. If you're that interested in getting into that space, you should make your own studio. You know what I mean? You should have another team or another focus on making the service game. You should not be turning all your studios into this is the problem Sony had. They're making Naughty Dog do a service game. They're making every other studio you can think of. You had Bungie and Firewalk and the people that making Fair games and so on and so forth. Like London Studio was making it as a service game, and so it's just not the move. You can't force people to make these. And the point is you're stifling people's creativity in order to make money, and money is the ultimate greed. And it is a business, and you need the money to keep the business going. But at the same time, you have to read the room. So to end this point is just the studios need to read the room better. You gotta know Arkane's audience loves Dishonored and Prey, and Deathloop and all that. They're not interested in some shitty service game. So and if you're gonna make a service game, do something that stands out. And Redfall wasn't it. I think a badass first person shooter campaign with vampires sounds a lot cooler than a service game like that. They should have just did that instead. Like for example, you and I both beat Evil West, and I'm not saying it was some amazing game, but it was a lot of fun for the
it was a great game. I had a great time.
Yeah, so it was a fun game, and that's what Arkane should deliver what they're really good at, and that's fantastic first person.
I mean, the same thing is true of BioWare, right? They went through that whole fucking period when they were doing Anthem, and then they wanted to make fucking Veilguard, or previously Dreadwolf, multiplayer / live service. Then they finally were able to talk people out of that, and now it's back to what Dragon Age has always been. But it's just the studios should focus on, not exclusively, but mainly on what they're good at. And if you want to do something different, that's fine. But it can't be this big radical departure with no build up to it. It can't just come so suddenly because your audience will just reject it. Like again, going back to Dragon Age with Veilguard, you cannot be disappointed that it's not a tactics game like Dragon Age Origins. Dragon Age has not been a tactics game, arguably, since Dragon Age 2. Like, that is not a reasonable expectation for this game. You could not expect it to be in any way, especially from the previews and what we know about BioWare these days. Like, it was never going to be like that, because they have very slowly, over time, moved away from that crunchy CRPG past. Like, Dragon Age Origins is the only straight-up tactics game. Even Dragon Age 2 has some real-time, action RPG kind of stuff. And then Inquisition just completely... pretty much completely, I mean, maybe tiny parts here and there, but almost completely action RPG. So, that's just an example of the studio slowly moving away, but not just quickly pulling the rug under your audience and then saying, surprise, live service game, zombies, vampires, whatever. Here you go.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. You should not be forcing your studios to make service games when you're best known for, what you're good at, and that's the biggest problem. So,
then the studios have to pay for it, and they get closed, which seems all kinds of fucked up to me.
And then your average Joe that only makes $50,000 a year gets screwed in the end, loses all their benefits. Yeah. All right, and then our final news topic of the night is the new Nintendo Music app, which is part of Nintendo Switch Online. So, Nintendo being their quirky selves, instead of putting things on Spotify or something, they did their own app called the Nintendo Music app. So it provides subscribers with access to game soundtracks across multiple generations. The app currently features music from 24 games, spanning from the classic NES to the recent Switch, with nearly 68 hours of music available at launch. Subscribers can loop tracks and extend playback time. More soundtracks are expected. The planned additions are from fan favorites like Donkey Kong Country 2 and Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. So I'm going through the list right now, and I see from Nintendo, their original NES, Metroid Famicom Disk System 1, and the Super Mario Brothers, the original from there, the one that saved the industry. Dr. Mario on the Game Boy, and Kirby's Dream Land on the Game Boy. I see Donkey Kong Country, Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island on the Super Nintendo. That feels like a very small Super Nintendo list. There's so many more games you could put on there. Nintendo 64, they put Ocarina of Time and Star Fox 64, two classics that I absolutely love. Game Boy Advance, they did Fire Emblem, The Blazing Blade. GameCube, they put Metroid Prime. That feels like a very small GameCube list. That should be way bigger than that. Nintendo DS, they did Nintendogs. And then they did Tamagotchi Collection. For the Wii, they did Super Mario Galaxy and the Wii Channels. Wii Channels Classic. And then finally, the Switch has the most. They did Animal Crossing New Horizons, Kirby Star Allies, Breath of the Wild, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Pikmin 4, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, Splatoon 3, Super Mario Brothers Wonder, and Super Mario Odyssey. All those games in that list are just bangers, great games. But this is a severely lacking. Nintendo has so many great IPs and games that like there's so many more soundtracks they could put on there. But I suppose it's a good start. But the biggest thing that jumps out to me is the glaring lack of Zelda. Like that's a very small list of Zelda games. Zelda has the best soundtracks in my opinion in Nintendo. How do you feel about this? It probably doesn't appeal to you, but like, how do you
No.
feel about this?
This is Nintendo being Nintendo. I mean, this is the most Nintendo fucking thing of all time. People begging for years and years for them to make their soundtracks more widely available on Spotify, YouTube, wherever else people get music these days.
Yeah,
And Nintendo's like, nah, we'll just do it ourselves and make our own fucking app. And I'm like, what? Why? But, and then that's not the glaring issue. Like, even if they want to do that, fine, whatever. But as far as I understand it, the app isn't free. You need to have a Nintendo online membership or something
yeah,
to get a piece of it, which is, to me, ridiculous. I would never do that. I'll just go on YouTube and listen to the soundtracks, or I'll, listen to like a lo-fi remix or something that doesn't
yeah.
get copyright struck.
I yeah.
I just can't imagine paying for this.
Yeah, I think it's just meant for people that already subscribe because Nintendo's subscription is pretty cheap. I pay $5 a month, or I pay $50 a year, so it's not too bad. But I would rather they just put it on Spotify and call it a day. But I think Nintendo just wants to, Nintendo, they like to be controlling of everything.
They want to control their intellectual property, no matter
Yeah.
what inconvenience it causes their customers.
Yeah. So it's not something that upsets me. It's not something that excites me. It's just whatever. If you're happy about it, then great, right? It's like whatever. But just to conclude this topic, what's expected to be added is, according to Video Game Chronicles, is Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy Kong's Quest. Great, I like that game. F-Zero X on Nintendo 64, Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword on the Wii, Legend of Zelda Wind Waker on the GameCube, Splatoon 2 on the Switch, Super Mario 64, Nintendo 64, and Wii Sports Wii. There's a lot of great soundtracks there. Wii Sports and Super Mario 64.
Wii Sports, let's go.
Yep. But Super Mario 64, I love, one of my favorite soundtracks. But that's like on YouTube, so I can just go on YouTube and listen to it. So, yeah. It's not something that excites me. So, all right. So that's our news for the day. So let's talk about what we're playing. Now, I'll start with the smaller games first, and then we can talk about a metaphor, and then I'll talk about Life is Strange last. So, I've been playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutants Unleashed, which is based on the movie, which I really, really loved last year. But it's a movie game, and it's not that great. It's not bad. It's average. It's very, I would say, mid-average game. I didn't have to buy it. My dad, Steam family, people buy games, and I can play their games, and they play my games, and that's basically how I'm playing this game. So my dad bought it on his account, and I get to play his games too. So I was interested. So I love Ninja Turtles. I'm a huge fan of them. I play a lot of Ninja Turtle games, so I had to play this one because I love the movie so much. The first thing that jumps out to me is the visuals. I think the visuals are very unique because the movie's visuals are really unique. Have you ever watched that movie yet, or have you seen it?
Oh, which movie? Sorry.
The new Ninja Turtles movie that came out last year.
Oh yeah, it was excellent. I loved it.
Yeah. So this is the game's based. This game's a sequel to the movie. It takes place right after the movie. So it uses the same art style, and the art style is unique, and it looks good on the video game. I'm playing on my Steam Deck, and it looks. I like the way it looks. The biggest problem with this game is the gameplay. It's not that it plays bad per se. It's just that it's very easy, and it's very button mashy. Like it's really just spam the square and X button, and then or triangle, and that's it. It's like it's a kid's game. It's one of those games where like you have a simple level design, a bunch of enemies show up on screen, you just smack the buttons, and it's that. So don't expect anything incredible with it. It's very average. It makes it feel repetitive, but and the levels are very generic. You just jump across. It's like climb on boxes, climb over a fence. Well, it's very linear. There's nowhere to go really. You just go straight, left, up, down, left, right, and that's that. fight the enemies. Things you know what I'm talking about. Every game we've played in the last 30 years, like every kids movie game, it's like Devil May Cry. The best way I can describe it, right? Like a worse version of Devil May Cry. The biggest one thing about this game though, it has a persona-like system where like you have relationships with characters. So you like it really copies Persona, where like you do something good for a character and you get like skills and bonuses from building a relationship with a character, just like Persona and Metaphor and things like that. So that was unique. It's very bare bones in my opinion. It's not. I feel like it's very underdeveloped. But it's a cool idea, but it just doesn't work for this game. I think. I would prefer if they just focused more on building a better, more linear experience and just having more fun with with the character designs and monster designs and gameplay. And I think that there's a lot of camera issues and there's loading time problems, and it does have some frame rate problems. So overall, it's a very mid game. It's like a 6 out of 10. I don't regret playing it. I'm gonna beat it, of course, but it's a fun time on the Steam Deck. I think it's a good game for like when I play for like 25 minutes or something like that. I'm not saying it's not going to be my game of the year, of course. It's not top 10 or anything. But like, not every game needs to be, a phenomenal game. Like it's fine. I think kids will like it. If you're a Ninja Turtles fan and you have kids and they just want to play like a simple linear beat 'em up kind of game, it's not like beat 'em up, but like a third person action game. Yeah, check it out. But it was $40, so I would wait for a sale. I would not buy this for $40. And like I said, I didn't have to. So yeah, Dory, if you ever want to try it, of course, you can try it on Steam. Being my family, so I
didn't care for Shredder's Revenge.
No, it's not.
Everybody said was
it's not like that
so
at all.
good.
Yeah, it's not like that.
Oh, okay.
It's 3D. It's a 3D. It's more like Devil May Cry.
Oh, okay.
Not like it's way worse than Devil May Cry, but you get what I'm saying. It's that kind of like third person fixed path, and you fight the enemies. You can't go forward until you fight the enemies, and then you move on to the next area. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everything like old school God of War, that kind of thing. All right, moving on. So I also been playing Sonic X Shadow Generations. So this is a remaster of a great Sonic game from the PS3 era. I played this on the PS3, and it's a good game. I really like the level design. I mean, Sonic Generations was already one of the best Sonic games ever. So, and of course, this is just a remaster of that game. So the Sonic levels are just the original game, but like cleaned up, and it looks good. It plays well on the Steam Deck, and it looks good on my PC. And but they definitely feel dated in comparison to the Shadow levels, because the Shadow levels are new. So when you compare the Sonic levels to the Shadow levels, it feels very dated because it came out like early 2010s. But I think the Shadow levels are really cool. There's a lot of replayability. A lot of clever mechanics like the chaos control. Like Shadow's my favorite Sonic character, and I always loved his edgy self. I know I was a MySpace kid with the My Chemical Romance and 3 Days Grace. I had
3 Days Grace.
I had Sephiroth and Vincent as my picture, and edgy gifs and all that. So so playing a Shadow is great. It's just if you've played Sonic Generations before, is it worth playing just for the Shadow levels? I don't know. It really depends if you're a Sonic fan or not. If you really like Sonic, I think you're gonna love this game. I think you're gonna love this collection, this remastered collection, because it's the original Sonic Generations that's really good, with new levels with Shadow, and I think it was like $50. I want to say. I really like it. I think it's worth playing, but it's just it's hard to recommend to anyone that's not a Sonic fan. I guess it's just Sonic. Like, and if you ever played Generations before, Dory?
No, I wasn't part of the PS3 generation.
Okay, so Sonic Generations is unique in the sense that you play as both Sonics. You play as the old '90s Sonic, and you play as the 3D Sonic that we know today. And the cool thing about that game is it has the same level, but like 2 versions of the same level. So you'll get like if you play as 90 Sonic, you'll get like a 3D, 2D like a level it's like a 3D version of a 90s Sonic level. So it feels like the original games. And then if you play as 3D Sonic, you get to do the same level, but like it's in the design of modern Sonic with 3D looping, 3D levels and the big loops and the big platform jumping and all that. So it's unique because it makes you're allowed to play as both styles of Sonic, and it's very nostalgic in that regard. You get to play in a lot of classic levels, and rescue all your friends and all that. So that's a lot of people love Sonic Generation. It's one of the best Sonic games. So overall, not to drag this out, I recommend it. But it largely depends if you like Sonic or not, and or platformers. And I love platformers. Dory, I recommend you if you ever want to try it. It's on Steam as well, and like I said, it plays really well on the Steam Deck.
Yeah, might be something I give a shot down the line. Not right now, but maybe down the line.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So speaking of Sega, they've been having a banger year. They've had Like a Dragon, they've had Sonic, and they've had Persona. I think they had Shin Megami Tensei this year too.
They did.
And they had Metaphor. And Dory is nearing the end. She unfortunately did not get to finish.
Literally the final boss. Fine, I won't say anymore. I'm just saying I'm at the final boss. I literally and we even delayed the podcast by an hour, not for me, but I'm literally at the final boss, and it's just taking for fucking ever. I've got a strategy now that I just read online, so hopefully I'll be able to speed it up, or I'll start the fight over. I don't care. But yeah, I'll talk about Metaphor. I will talk mostly about late game, but I will try to be as vague as possible. I don't have a ton to add from what I talked about last week, but I do have a few things. My biggest criticism of this game at this point is I don't like the overworld combat. I find it very stingy, not as responsive as I'd want. I don't expect your character to be like in a fighting game where you can attack, cancel, dodge, cancel, whatever. But it does get frustrating when you never know how many strikes you have to do on an enemy in the overworld to stun it, and suddenly it'll go for an attack, and you'll see the little glint, and you'll try to dodge, but your character can't attack cancel, so you're just locked in, and you just get hit. And that's not as big of a deal early game or even mid game, but late game, it's a big deal. I mean, enemies do a lot of damage. They have very powerful abilities. It's annoying, and you're basically forced into a battle that you didn't want to enter on those turns specifically. Now, it's not some great mark against the game, but I have heard myself say several times now, I hate the overworld combat. That's probably an exaggeration, but I do feel frustration with it. It feels undercooked compared to, and I know fundamentally this is not an action RPG. It's a turn-based RPG that happens to have some small, very small action RPG elements. I just feel like those small elements could have been done a little better. I find myself, the other problem too is that the camera is very focused in on you as a character. And so just like that was super uncomfortable, it's also kind of super uncomfortable when an enemy comes up from behind you while you're attacking another enemy. And the camera's got you and that first enemy, fine. But the enemy will come up from behind you and you won't be able to see it coming because there's no audio cues and there's no visual cues. And so I've literally jumped. Or not jump, but said, "Oh shit," or something. I was in fucking Silent Hill 2 because I can't see it. Didn't see an enemy's attack coming. It just gets annoying. It gets frustrating, especially with the Melancholia crystals that just pour out enemies. Early game, mid game, that's not a huge issue because the enemies they pour out that it spawns usually are weak. They're with blue aura, so you can take them out in a couple hits. No big deal. But late game, that is not a thing. It's all yellow or red. Enemies that are either at your level or above your level. That's when it gets really frustrating because you can just basically... Now, it's good for grinding, of course, but I'm not interested in grinding. So basically, it's because I'm pretty much at level where I'm supposed to be. I'm late game, you're going to realize you're pretty much always 10 levels, at least for me. I did all the side quests. I have all my royal virtues maxed out. I did almost every single bond except for one character who I don't like, and I will not talk to him. He's a sleazeball. I just don't like him. And I, that's kind of the point of his character, but I didn't even see like a point in using that archetype. I haven't even used it once. So I just didn't. But yeah, so it gets a little frustrating late game, some of these things. I will say my last criticism, well, actually I have one other thing too, but it's more of a philosophical thing. But the nurse, the one of the characters you meet, who's like an inventor, and you meet him pretty early on in the game. He has this big game-wide like quest where you're supposed to gather all these things for him. I don't want to give too much away. I would say doing about half of it is maybe worth it because you get some good like companion benefits, some good bond boons. But I was incredibly disappointed with the resolution of the quest and the items you eventually get. It reminds me of that Outside Extra or Outside Xbox video that they do where it's like 7 side quests you should never complete. I would add this one, honestly. It's a pretty disappointing resolution. It makes sense in context and in character with Nuris, but I just think you don't really get, for all the time and energy you spend to like look for what he wants in the dungeons that you go to, it just doesn't feel like it's worth it. That's part of what broke funny story. That's part of what broke my gaming chair because I was really pissed off and I got up and I was like, oh, like this is so annoying. I sat back down angrily and I felt my gaming chair go like the back of it like bent a little, all because I've had my gaming chair for 5 years. So I use it every day. So it's not like I just bought it or something. Right. So I'm not that pissed, but it is kind of funny. So yeah, I really don't like that quest. I also think there's another quest with one of the side characters that I just philosophically have issues with as a philosophy major. And this game is very philosophy heavy, obviously, mostly political philosophy. But there's some stuff about I just want to clarify, I'm talking about a video game, but if we start stealing from the rich, everybody's going to steal from each other. And it's going to be a never ending cycle of deception and fear and theft. And I'm just like, that just doesn't necessarily hold up true historically or factually, but whatever, it's like a minor quibble. That's pretty much all my criticisms. I think there are some ridiculous bosses towards the end. I still don't like that some of the bosses can heal themselves. That will always piss me off and I'll always call it out. It carries through to the end of the game, but generally I'll talk about the positives. The game is just incredible in general. It has the plot that I won't spoil any of the twists, but there are twists and they are very good. They all make sense. They all recontextualize the plot in very interesting ways. I literally had like one of the revelations that happens. I literally had to think in my head for a second about something, and it just changes the way you see the whole game and your relationships to these characters. It's really good, is my point. They keep making Louise somewhat understandable as a villain. I mean, they never settle for making him black and white. He is always understandable in his motivations. Even the characters have these moments where they're like, I understand what Louise is saying and why he's doing what he's doing, but he's wrong. Always that very important, but he's wrong. But I mean, it's good. He's not a simple villain, and he pretty much eschews any kind of simple motivation for his actions throughout the game. I felt like getting my bond at level 8 with every character was pretty much worth it. There's not romance per se in this game, but there is kind of a relationship you can form with one of the characters if you get far enough in the bond with them. I won't spoil who. It's basically like a forced romance, but I already thought the characters gelled really well together and thought that I really liked them together. I was already kind of shipping them. So it didn't bother me. And it's not like there are choices and dialogue options, but most of the time it doesn't make a damn difference. This isn't a game that's built like Dragon Age or Mass Effect, like a BioWare game, right? This is an Atlas game. Your dialogue choices affect things, but it's not like the story is going to be significantly different. So I don't really care. It's not a huge deal, but I know it bothers some people. I mean, I saw a couple, like a thread or two on Reddit about it. So it's worth noting. But generally, I found the bonds incredibly worth it. Seb and I were talking about the archetypes. As you get more powerful, I mean, you just got some bonkers attacks. It's really cool too. I don't have a lot of experience with Megami Tensei or with Persona, but there are a lot of references to both of them. Late game especially, which I think is really cool. I still have mostly positive things to say about it. I have some quibbles. Again, biggest one is probably the overworld. I'm torn on the pacing. Yeah, I feel like you could have gotten rid of some of the twists and turns and had like a solid 50-hour experience on our hands. But I don't think it's egregious or that it, it all logically makes sense why it's this long. Does it have to be this long? Probably not. I think you could have shaved off 20 hours. There's also times, especially late game, where you get a lot of free time before the final confrontation. And there are some days where I was just doing jack shit. I just had nothing to do. And there, unlike Majora's Mask, a game that came out over 20 years ago, there's no way to, just naturally cause time to pass. You can't just conk out in the middle of the street or whatever. But that's about it. I love the game. I think it's incredible. It's not my GOTY, and no matter what it does, it's not going to be my GOTY. I just like Infinite Wealth more. I like the combat a little bit more and how it deals with the overworld combat. I like the characters a little more, and I like the plot a little more. It's not a huge difference. And these are like really minor differences, but they are differences. So that's pretty much it for me with Metaphor. I'm going to beat it tonight. I doubt I'll have anything to say next week because whatever I say will be spoiler. So, it's an incredible game. You should go play it. It's made me want to go check out the Persona series. So I can't really give it much higher praise than that.
Yeah, I will have it beat before the end of the year. There's too many games going on right now, so I'm trying to balance a bunch of games. But Metaphor is my game of the year still because I put plenty of hours into it. I just haven't beat it yet. So let's talk about Life is Strange Double Exposure, which I'm on chapter 4, nearing the end of the game. There's 5 chapters overall. Before I start, Life is Strange is one of my favorite series. I've beaten all of them multiple times. So I consider myself, I guess, an expert on Life is Strange, or at least a huge fan of it. I guess I'm not an expert because I don't remember like every single detail from every game. Not like Resident Evil or something. But I love Life is Strange, and I think Double Exposure is a pretty good game. I think it's a good game. I can see why it has mixed reviews. It got low 70s, so it's, I guess in that sense it's a disappointment. People talking about how the mixed reaction to Dragon Age, but Life is Strange Double Exposure really has mixed views by people. And I'm not talking like politically why. I mean like Life is Strange fans.
It's wild. I saw a 9 from IGN and a 9 from Gaming Bolt. And then I look at the Metacritic and I see a 2 out of 10. I see a 5 out of 10. I see a bunch of 7s and a couple of 8s. It's wild. It's all over the place.
Yeah. But the biggest criticism I've seen has been from the Life is Strange fans. People just don't like this game at all. Like the direction they went with Max. Now I'll say this game doesn't need to exist. I think Max's story concluded in the first game. I feel like she learned her lesson. Whether you would in my ending, because I prefer that she sacrificed Chloe. As much as I love Chloe and she's my favorite character in Life is Strange, I thought I think the whole game, the point to me of the game was for Max to learn that you can't tamper with time and you just gotta accept the consequences of your actions, because the whole game was her just trying to reverse her mistakes, right? And every time she reversed her mistakes, something worse would happen. Other people disagree.
Well, I don't think you can blame her for the way that Chloe died necessarily, but yes, generally it was to do things over.
Yeah. No, I don't mean I'm not blaming her for the Chloe's death, but it's just like she kept trying to fix things, so it would just get worse and worse and worse.
Right, of course.
And then like Chloe,
right.
There was one timeline where Chloe would be like bedridden, totally paralyzed, and so on and so forth. But this game, Max is back. She's an adult. She's in graduate school. I believe she's a teacher or like a TA or something.
Yeah,
because she's teaching students. Although they don't show that, but she always says my students. And she's, I forget what place. I want to say it's the Northeast or something. It's a snowy area.
Yeah, it's Northeast. Yeah,
and
it's Vermont, I think.
Yeah, I want to say Vermont. Something like it's definitely right around there. It's first thing that jumps out at me is the visuals. It's definitely different than the original Life is Strange. It's photorealistic a lot more than the original game. This is where people start getting a little sour on it because people prefer. There's fans like the hardcore fans that prefer that they stuck with more with the cel shaded, cartoony look. This one definitely goes more for the photorealistic. I'm not saying it's super photorealistic. Of course, it's still Life is Strange. But it's definitely a different Max. Max looks very different. Her eyes are very realistic. It's kind of I don't know to word this. It's like it's kind of, it makes me feel weird a little bit. It looks off in a way. Just because it looks so realistic but cartoony at the same time. And
so it's like Uncanny Valley.
Yeah, but I want to say it's like it's not bad. It's just that like if you play it I beat Life is Strange like the first one like 5 times, and like Max just looks like it's just weird seeing Max in a different art style. Basically, it's like putting a Walking Dead character in the Telltale into like a God of War, Last of Us style. You know what I mean? If you saw like Lee in the Walking Dead be put in realistic, it would.
I feel like what you're describing is like when you see Sora next to Jack Sparrow or something. Kingdom Hearts 2.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. Kingdom Hearts. Yeah, exactly. When like especially Kingdom Hearts 3, right? Like how when they have Donald and Goofy and Sora, and then you have like realistic Jack Sparrow. It's not bad. It's just I'm trying to find the word for it, but it's just like
it's off-putting.
Off-putting is the way. That's that. Thank you. That's the one. It doesn't bother me, but I could definitely see why people have an issue with that. Now, I think Max is a cool character. I think she's very likable. She's still quirky. She still has her like her like goofy moments, her funny words that she uses, her language. I like her and her thoughts are funny. She's still the same Max to me. I feel like she's the same Max. I think a big thing with her though is she's I guess she's more bold now. She's like she embraces her like bad guy side a lot. Like everybody calls her like, oh wow, you're the kid that you're the guy or girl that always like breaks into things, or you're the person that always like manipulates people or like sneaks your way into something and breaks a lock, or like she has a reputation. Like everybody knows like, oh, you're the girl to go to for like when I have to do something shady. And she kind of really goes with it. Like in the first game, she's not like that. It was like Chloe doing that, and Max kind of went along with it. This Max is more confident in being an adult now, of course, and going with it. And she's experienced what she's gone through. Also, story wise, the story is about a murder. A major character dies that and you have to solve the murder. And a lot of twists happen, and Max ends up getting new powers. Not the time travel powers where she can rewind time, but a powers where she can go to 2 different timelines. A timeline where her friend is alive, and a timeline where her friend is dead. And the whole game mechanic is you jumping back and forth, solving puzzles, finding the clues, using both timelines. And it's creative in that sense, but I think they did a better job with that mechanic in the beginning of the game, in the first half of the game, and not so much in the second half of the game so far. It's it's a cool mechanic, but it feels just not enough developed for me. I think the new characters, are all very likable. I They feel like Life is Strange characters for the good and the bad, and they're good in the sense that like they're cheesy, but they're very likable. They're very charming. You, every fan's gonna have a character they really like, and you can draw to, and it allows you to pick and choose who you want to have a relationship with and how you want to approach things. And that's one of the appeals of Life is Strange is like everybody can have a different play style and different story to an extent of how you want to tackle it. Like you can have Max be bisexual. You can have Max have a relationship with a guy and a girl at the same time in two different timelines, or you can make her just a lesbian or just make her straight. It's really up to you. This game definitely hits on the LGBT stuff a lot. I mean, and that doesn't bother me, of course, but it's definitely like a very, I don't want to say hammered in, but it's in there a lot, a lot, a lot. They just have the pride flag like in the back and the scene, and just randomly, or they have a trans character. They have a lot of, almost every character is bi or gay in some form, that kind of thing. So it's going to be easy for people to say, "Oh, it's very woke." It's a Life is Strange game, so it's going to be slow. It's going to be a lot of dialogue, and there's a lot of times you're going to be putting the controller down and just listening to the dialogue and watching a scene. This game is very narrative heavy, and that's Life is Strange though. So you have to know what you're getting into. Don't expect this game to be some action packed game. This is very much so a story driven narrative game where that story and the narrative is what the focus of the game is, and you solve puzzles, and there's certain parts where you have to do stealth so you don't get caught, and the mechanics of jumping between the timeline and all that. But overall, it's a Life is Strange game. I'm really liking it. It's a 8 out of 10 for me. It's not gonna be my top 10 or anything. I'm happy to see Max again. I really like Max. She's one of my favorite characters, and I don't think this game needs to exist, and it has issues for sure. But overall, I'm really liking it, and I'm having a good time with it. And then I like the music. It does the True Colors mechanic where you just kind of you can meditate and just relax and then take in the music. It does that again because same developer, Deck Nine, and I don't think the music is as good as like Life is Strange 1, but it's definitely good. And yeah, it's just Life is Strange again. So if you really like the series, you might have issues with like lacking Chloe and lacking like I see some people criticize it. It's like it damages the first game, or they don't like the direction it went in or whatever. But if you're just like a regular fan, like you're into it and you just want to play a cool narrative game, I think you'll be fine with it. All right, so Dory, you have any opinion or questions, anything like that you want to talk about?
No, I'm glad you're enjoying it. I'm pretty sure I'll enjoy it as well. I'm excited to play it once I beat Metaphor, which will happen someday. I am excited to see what Max has been up to and how, I already know how I'm going to deal with the fallout of Life is Strange 1, because the game basically allows you to make either of the endings canon for your playthrough, which I think is pretty cool.
Yep.
But yeah, I have seen other comments from. Sorry about that. There we go. I have seen other comments about how some people feel like the first half is really good and the second half kind of, falls a little bit. Some people say it doesn't feel like a full game. It feels like it's just setting stuff up. So I'll see for myself. It doesn't sound like it'll be a top 10 for me either. But yeah, I'm really just interested at this point for AAA games. It's either going to be Dragon Age, or it's going to be some indie game that I haven't played that's on my Steam wish list. But yeah, I'm excited to play it. I'll have stuff to say next week. I'll probably have beaten it by then, honestly, but we'll see.
Yeah.
How many hours are you in?
7 hours.
Okay, and you're almost done.
Yeah, I want to say I'll take going. If I have 2 more chapters, I'm like half done with chapter 4. I'll say I'll probably have another 3-4 hours left.
Yeah, I should be able to beat it by next week. I'll talk about it.
Yeah, I think you'll like it. You're a Life is Strange fan like me, but I don't think you're one of those hardcore, like this is not my Life is Strange people.
No,
I
I
don't
don't
think.
really give a shit about that. I never I got into it really late. 2016 or something like that. And or 20 yeah, I think it was 2016. I don't know if that's late. I forget when the first one came out. Um but I loved Life is Strange 1. I love True Colors a lot. I think it's my favorite of the franchise. I haven't played 2. I played the Hero prequel to 2. And I played the first 2 chapters of
Yeah,
2, I want to say, but I didn't beat it.
yeah,
Um but yeah, I love the and I played Before the Storm and all that stuff. But yeah, I love Life is Strange. It's an incredible series, and I hope it does max justice.
yeah.
The reviews I've seen have said yes, but I've seen some stuff online that says no.
Yeah.
So I will see for myself.
I really like the relationship aspect of it. I think they did a great job with like Amanda, and I love the chemistry between Amanda and Max. You don't have to have that chemistry, but like I just feel like for me, Max feels like she likes women more, just how I
Yeah,
view it. And I like Vin's character as well, though. Like, if you want to go the straight route, where she's in the Vin, I think Vin's like, I think Vin's bi because he talks about like all of a sudden he talks in the bar, he's talking about like being into guys and finding them attractive or whatever. So I guess he's bi too, but you can kiss him and everything. So I guess I'm assuming he's bi. And I think there is a trans character, and I think they did a really good job with this character. Um, she's kind of she's a major character. And she's kind of a jerk, but she's like a teacher. But I think the inclusiveness is really good. It might be a little heavy handed, but I do think you know what I mean. Like it's just we have to have the flag in the background,
yeah.
that kind of thing.
I mean, I personally, I love heavy-handed inclusion at this point because people are just being fucking, uh, honestly weak, pathetic people about this shit.
Yeah,
So I'm cool with it. I hope they put 50 pride flags in the background, and I hope everybody's wearing rainbows and sparkles just to
sure.
piss off the worst kind of people.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, in all seriousness, though, I mean, I do think it's great to have that inclusion.
yeah,
Different topic, but Dragon Age Veilguard. I am never able to do this, but I'm able to be non-binary and go by she/her.
yeah,
So I think that's awesome because that's how I identify. But you never get that in games, so it's really cool. I think all this inclusion stuff is very good. There's of course wrong ways to do it. There's tokenism, but I almost always think diversity in of itself is an inherent good
yeah,
because it broadens your perspectives and gives you more reasons to engage with art than to disengage. If it's done well, of course, you can do trans representation or any other kind of representation poorly, but generally, true Life is Strange does it well. But yeah, I'm excited to play it.
yeah. I think it does it well because it doesn't make it like, oh, this character is trans and that's like their whole identity is just them being
Right,
trans.
exactly.
I think because
Right.
the character is clearly trans, but and they basically they make it clear that, but they don't like say, oh, this character's trans. They like, it's just character something's just happening to the character and they just so happen to be trans. You know what I mean? It's not the main focus. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
That anyway. So Life is Strange. I recommend you try it. You can always wait for a sale. Just gotta know what you're getting into. It's a very narrative heavy game and it's slow, and so don't expect anything action packed. So yeah, I think you will like it overall, Dory. I don't think you're gonna love it. I don't think it's gonna be like your favorite Life is Strange game. I think you're probably gonna like True Colors better, but I do think you'll like it, honestly. All right, so that's our show. Next week we'll talk about Dragon Age in more detail, and I think most of the runtime of our episode next week is going to be focused on Dragon Age because it's a huge game.
Yeah.
And I'll be putting a lot of hours into it starting either tonight or tomorrow. I did play on Halloween. I just didn't get. I only got to play a little bit because I was exhausted.
Yeah.
And
I only played the prologue. I will have played more, but probably not as much as Seb. I am going to focus on getting Life is Strange done before I start Veilguard, just because I don't want to start Veilguard, which is a huge long game, and then start like a 10-hour game. That feels weird. So I'd rather, put a smaller game in the middle of two huge RPGs, which is what Seb's basically doing. I'm just a little bit behind because I insist on finishing Metaphor. So that's what I'm going to do.
Absolutely. And then I'll have Metaphor hopefully beaten. I think I'll have it beaten by when we do the top 10 list for sure.
Do you want to know what hour count I'm at or no?
Sure. Doesn't bother me.
Yeah. So I am about 70 hours in, and I've done all the royal virtues, all of the contracts that you can take out on monsters, pretty much every single bond. I'm at the final boss, and it took me about 70 hours. It's not a completionist run, but I would say I did pretty much everything your average gamer would probably do in this game on their first run.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's what I expect. I expect I should be in about the 60s or 70s when I beat the game.
Yeah.
I'm at like 30 hours now, so it's not like I've only put like 2 hours in the game. Just not like as much as you. Only because I had to work and prioritize other games just for the podcast and other things like that. And I have to be in the mood to play it, that kind of thing. So anyway, so we'll talk about any other news that comes out next week, and we'll talk about Dragon Age, which will be the majority of the episode. Take care, Dory, and have a good night. And I'll see you.
Bye, everybody.
I'll see you next week. Peace.